Chapter 16. That night, I could not stop thinking about Uncle Lee and how he was willing to do anything, go literally anywhere, even into the belly of a dumpster, to get what he wanted. Was that insanity or courage? I didn't know. What I did know was when they served us hamburgers at school the next day, real burgers, not saltine burgers, I was bringing mine home for Uncle Lee. I didn't care how loudly my stomach protested. Carefully, I wrapped the burger up and hid it in my jacket. I made sure not to squish it all day long. When I got home, I heated the burger up in the microwave, then rewrapped it in a napkin, just like they did in commercials on TV. I brought it to Uncle Lee's room. Uncle Lee was delighted. He asked me whether I'd eaten, and I lied and said I had. But then my stomach betrayed me and growled loudly. Uncle Lee laughed. "Come on, let's eat it together," he said. I sat down and divided the burger, and this time I shared more than just a couple of crumbs. Uncle Lee ended up staying there 3 nights. Each night was filled with delicious food and riveting stories about customers. And things like their weird sauce requests. One guy insisted on burgers with ketchup and jam. By the end of his stay, our refrigerator was nearly empty, so my mom and I went to Ralph's, the American grocery store 3 blocks away. Normally, we'd go to the Chinese supermarket, but today, there was a 2-for-1 cauliflower sale at Ralph's. "We should really stop letting people stay at the motel for free," my mom said with a sigh. She picked up the cauliflowers, put them in a plastic bag, and tossed it into a cart. "But you and Dad are so happy when they come," I said, thinking of how animated my parents were at dinner these last few days. "I know, and they're such good people, and their stories," she put her hand on her chest, "heart-wrenching." They really were. All week, I've been going back in and filling in all the details in my journal. They were fascinating, the stories. "But I'm worried about Mr. Yao," my mom groaned. "If he catches us..." Her voice trailed off. I worried about that too sometimes. Mr. Yao hadn't come around for a week. We were due a visit any time. "We should be careful," I said, reaching for a box of Honey Nut Cheerios, my favorite. "I think I just have to put my foot down and say no more visitors," my mom said. She looked at the items in the shopping cart, eyes lingering on my Honey Nut Cheerios. "What? I always get them," I said. I picked up the box and held it close to my chest. I knew money was tight, but surely not no Cheerios tight, right? Right? Her pause said it all. "It's fine," she said, reaching for the box. "Here, put that back in the cart." But I held on to it. I peered longingly at it, all those delicious, honey-kissed circles on the box, the smiling bee that says, "Nobody can say no to Honey Nut Cheerios." Well, I can think of one person, me. Slowly, I put the box back up on the shelf. "What are you doing?" my mom asked. "It's okay," I said. "You don't want it anymore?" I shrugged. "I'm kind of sick of it." I turned away before my mom could see my eyes. That Sunday, as usual, my father and I loaded up the car with empty aluminum cans. You'd be amazed at how much soda people drank at the motel. My dad and I crushed the cans, put them into trash bags, and drove over to the local recycling center. I wished my mom could come too, but Mr. Yao had the rule about never leaving the motel unattended. The recycling center gave us $10 for the cans, which we took and exchanged for pennies. Then we went over to the lake, where we sat and went over them one by one, trying to find the one special penny we'd been on the lookout for as long as I can remember. It was the 1943 copper alloy penny, My dad said it was worth $40,000. At least, my dad insisted, maybe even more. I just looked it up on eBay right now, and it's worth way more than that if you check it out. When my dad told me that, my mouth went dry. $40,000 for just one penny? Think of all the Honey Nut Cheerios we could buy. My dad said the reason they were so valuable was because there were just 40 of them made. They were made by accident during the war when pennies were converted to steel. So far, only one had been found. The rest were just out there waiting to be found. We didn't find the 1943 that day, but we did find a 1984 double die, and my dad said that was worth $30. A double die is when they accidentally printed the words twice on the coin. Anytime that kind of mistake happens, the coin's automatically worth a lot more. I tilted my head to one side. Why is it automatically worth more? I asked my dad. He didn't respond right away, so I added the 1984 double die to our collection of valuable pennies. We had about 17 pennies in the bag from all our searching over the years. Altogether, it was worth about $300. My dad was enormously proud of them. He never once suggested we cash in those pennies. They were his babies. Why are the mistake ones worth more, Dad? That's a great question, he said. He put his coins down and turned to me. The fact that a penny can be worth 400,000 times more because of a mistake, what does that tell you? I shook my head. It means a mistake isn't always a mistake, he said. Sometimes a mistake is actually an opportunity, but we just can't see it right then and there. Do you know what I mean? He gazed into the distance. Like coming to this country, for instance, he said. My dad shook his head and chuckled. I thought it was going to be very different. I closed my eyes, thinking of the plane ride over. My dad had given my hand a squeeze and asked, "Are you excited?" I nodded, even though I was more scared than excited. But he wasn't. He was just excited. As we flew across the Pacific, he and my mom had talked a mile a minute, making plans and setting goals. My mother asked if he thought we could go see the Statue of Liberty. Sure, that'll be the first place we'd go for vacation, New York City, my dad had said. We'll stay in a nice motel, get dinner in a nice restaurant. You really think we can do all that? My mom had asked. I know we can, my dad had said, beaming. I looked at my father now, 2 years later. He had grays in his hair. The creases on his forehead had become ditches. Would you still have come? I asked him softly. If you knew? He looked up at me. In a heartbeat, he said, "You know why?" I shook my head. Because of you. You're my special penny, Mia, he said, touching my nose. You know that? I smiled. Just sitting next to my dad by the beautiful lake, it made me so happy. I decided right then and there it didn't even matter if we ever found the 1943. But it would be nice if we did. Chapter 17. My mom was hopping from one foot to the other in the front office when we got back from the lake. While we were gone, the cable stopped working, and that was a big problem because free cable was a basic requirement of every motel. It was one of those things customers absolutely had to have. You gotta do something. I'm missing Cheers, Fred exclaimed. We picked up the phone and speed dialed Mr. Yao. Luckily, even Mr. Yao understood the urgency of the situation. This was not like the washing machine breaking down. People could live with dirty towels for a day or two. but they needed their TV. He immediately dispatched his cable repairman to the motel, a guy named Jose. Jose arrived at the motel half an hour later with a pickup truck full of tools and his daughter in tow. My jaw dropped to the ground when I saw who hopped out of the truck. It was Lupe. Lupe stood in the parking lot, squinting at the front office and blocking the sun from her eyes with her hands. I waved to her and started running outside. Her hands flew to her mouth when she saw me. At first, neither of us said a word. We just stood awkwardly at the front desk as my parents cleaned and her dad fixed the cable up on the roof. I kept looking over at her, hoping she'd say something. Finally, when I couldn't stand it any longer, I cleared my throat. "I have to tell you something," I said. "What?" she asked. "I don't really have a golden retriever," I admitted. "I have to tell you something too," she said nervously. "What?" I asked. "Me neither," she said. I smiled. It turned out, just as I had been making everything up at school, so had Lupe. She didn't have a big house or 3 dogs, and although she did have a trampoline, it was one of those tiny ones, and there was no way you could do a flip on it. "I don't know why I said all those things," she said. "It just comes out." "I don't know why I said all those things either," I said. The best part about Lupe and I coming clean was that she knew all about Mr. Yao and how horrible he was. She knew more than I did, in fact. She told me he had 4 motels in Los Angeles, 1 in San Diego, a couple in Nevada, and 1 on some island in Florida. That's why he's sometimes gone for weeks at a time, she explained. Her dad had been working for him for years, and he was just as rotten to him as he was to us. "So you know that Jason's his son?" I asked. "Of course I know that Jason's his son," Lupe said. "Didn't I tell you from day one that he was terrible?" I could hardly contain it. My heart swelled with excitement. Finally, I had someone to share all this with. "You know what, Lupe?" I asked. "I hope our cable breaks down every day so you can come over." "Me too," Lupe grinned. Your assignment is now to read chapters 18 through 21, which seems like a lot, but it's only up to page 100. When you're finished, add to the discussion.